Good afternoon. Welcome to the April Pillar 3 meeting. I am Dr. Olivia Pearson, co-chair, and joined by the co-chair, Mr. Kirkland Murray, if you wouldn't mind introducing yourself, and the other group members as well.
So good afternoon, everyone, and happy April. My name is Kirkland Murray. I'm the local workforce development director in Anne Arundel County, Maryland, and also president of the Maryland Workforce Association, which is the association of the 13 workforce boards in the state of Maryland. And I will turn it over to Dave Harper.
Thank you, Kirkland. Dave Harper from Chesapeake College on Maryland's beautiful Eastern Shore. And pass to Nona.
Hi, good afternoon. I'm Nona Carroll with the Maryland Business Roundtable for Education. We do college and career readiness programming with students throughout the state. And I believe that's all the members that we have on the line.
All right, we have some esteemed guests today. And so the first person I see, Dr. Kincaid, if you wouldn't mind introducing yourself.
Hello, I'm Richard Kincaid. I lead the Division of College and Career Pathways for the Maryland State Department of Education.
Thank you. Dr. Hoffman.
Good afternoon. Kurt Hoffman, Senior Vice President, Instructional and Student Affairs at Allegheny College of Maryland.
Awesome. And we have, of course, several members from the AIB here. And so we're going to start with Ms. Schaefer.
Thank you. Thanks. I'm going to try to start to share my screen. And while I do that, I just want to share my appreciation for being here today with you today. That's not working. Hold on a second. Share screen. Okay. And if you could verbally let me know if you see that, because I can't see anything now.
Yes.
Looks good.
Perfect. And if somebody is raising their hands, I can't see the meeting at this point. So just shout out. But good afternoon, Chair Pearson, Chair Murray, and members of the Pillar 3 Advisory Committee. I'm excited to be here with you to give you an overview of legislative changes to Pillar 3 that took place over the session. And just as an overview, the 90-day session saw 2,600 bills filed, 878 bills passed. And while the governor has signed a few bills already, he has until May 27th to either sign them, veto them, or allow bills to take effect without his signature. And the governor's values were evidenced in his budget and in his legislation that were based on 3 pillars this session. Investing in industries of the future was one pillar, and industries of the future are ones that grow and diversify the Maryland economy. He wanted to reform the tax system to make it simpler and more fair, as well as encouraging growth. And then investing in people, particularly in students in our workforce. So to that end, 2 of the bills that he proposed this session were the Excellence in Maryland Public Schools Act, which came to be known as his education bill. He believed that it maintained the state's commitment to the blueprint, while it also adjusted blueprint implementation for sustainability, long-term and successful implementation. And then he also championed and passed the Registered Apprenticeship Investments for a Stronger Economy, or the RAISE Act, which expands apprenticeships to new industries and employers, and it breaks down the barriers to adopting registered apprenticeships. So in addressing these goals, the governor proposed 2 pieces of legislation that directly impacted blueprint implementation, both of which you likely heard quite a bit about over session. With regard to pre-K through 12th grade, the governor introduced the Excellence in Maryland Public Schools Act, which the administration maintains statewide commitment to achieving those goals. There were three major components to that bill. You probably heard a lot about collaborative time, and that's because the change to the implementation of collaborative time, the pause in implementing it, required also a pause in funding, which then, because that collaborative time per pupil allocation is embedded in the foundation amount for students, that then not only affected the foundation amount that schools receive for every student, but all of the at-promise funding that flows from the foundation amount as a proportion to our students that have the most high needs in our school system. And those include funding for compensatory education, special education, and multilingual learners. So that had a large impact. He also established some new programs and initiatives and expanded existing programs related to the teacher shortage for the recruitment, retention, and development of our teachers. And then he made some adjustments to community schools funding, as well as some oversight and administration. And just sort of to summarize what happened over session, that bill was heavily amended and discussed and debated, but at the end of the day, Blueprint formulas were all fully funded, and that includes the foundation formula, the at-promise formulas, and the community schools formulas, as well as per pupil allocations for collaborative time. And that was put back into the foundation for FY26 without the requirement to implement collaborative time. And then I'll talk a little more about this later in more depth, but there was a career counseling bill that was sort of folded into the governor's education bill. And as I said, I'll go over that a little later. But I did want to provide you with just an overview of the other legislative changes by pillar, since the pillars are all interconnected. And so I just wanted to make sure you are, for awareness, knew about these. So in Pillar 1, there was a requirement for MSD to convene a work group to conduct an analysis of the publicly funded full-day pre-K mixed delivery system. There's also an expansion of a local property tax credit for qualifying childcare homes and centers, which allows counties to provide some support to childcare providers. In Pillar 2, there is a new quality pathway towards candidates to qualify for their initial teaching certificate, and that should help candidates as well as our teacher shortage. And then Pillar 4 saw two bills. One was to have MSDE develop a comprehensive plan for establishing restorative practice schools and providing technical assistance to school boards who want to establish such a school. And another establishes a task force, again, overseen by MSDE, to take a look at how to improve attendance and reduce chronic absenteeism in schools. And then finally, around Pillar 5, governance and accountability, there were some changes to community schools in his education bill, as well as some additional reporting required of the AIB. So I just want to now focus on Pillar 3 legislative changes. And so let me start at the beginning. Once upon a time, at the very beginning of session, there was House Bill 772, Career Counseling for Middle and High School Students, alterations. It was all by itself, no cross-file in the Senate, and its only goals are summed up there in that first bullet. As introduced, the bill would have maintained the funding for the program, $62 per pupil with an inflation factor, indefinitely beyond the current termination date of fiscal year FY26. It would also require local workforce development boards in collaboration with county boards of education to report to the AIB annually on the use of their funds and the impact of those funds on providing career counseling to students. I'm going to skip to a few chapters of the story to the ending, because while this bill didn't pass, ultimately it was amended and folded into the governor's education bill with additional amendments. And the final provisions are described in these next two bullets. So rather than maintain the funding until FY26, which is current law, the funding will be maintained through FY28, as will the annual reporting that's required by workforce development boards and their partners on the use of the funds and the efficacy of those funds in providing career counseling. It also added a fairly extensive report to be done by the AIB and provided to the governor and the General Assembly by January 1st of 2027 as to whether counseling services were adequately preparing students for post-CCR pathways, whether students received high quality career opportunities, and program results, including students embarking on satisfactory career paths after high school. So I just want to go into these in a little more depth because they are pretty hefty in terms of the data points that are required. So under counseling services adequately preparing students for post-CCR pathways, the report is required to provide the percentage of students completing a career readiness assessment, the self-reported student confidence levels in their career readiness, the number of students participating in career counseling sessions and completing a 6-year career plan by the end of 8th grade, the number of students who participated in career exploration activities, which includes field trips, college or training center visits, career fairs, or registered apprenticeship programs, the number of students who identified post-college and career readiness pathway preferences, and the percentage of students applying to post-secondary education, career training programs, or registered apprenticeships. And then under the broad category of whether students are receiving high quality career opportunities as a result of the program, the report must include the number of students participating in registered apprenticeships, internships, job shadowing, or other workplace opportunities, employer satisfaction ratings of student preparedness and performance, the number of students securing a registered apprenticeship or part-time employment related to their field of interest after engaging with the program before graduation, and the number of new employer collaborations each year. And finally, the report requires the identification of long-term metrics to determine the program's effectiveness. Other items under that heading that are required to be considered are the employment rate of program graduates within 6 to 12 months post-graduation, percentage of students employed in their field of interest related industry within 1 year of graduation, student reported job satisfaction and career alignment based on follow-up surveys, college persistence and completion rates for students, and the reduction in the number of students who are unemployed or not participating in a post-secondary education program. And that would be compared to pre-program data. And that report is due January 1st, 2027, which is the last year that the per pupil allocation will be provided to school systems. No, I'm sorry, because it's provided through 2028, so it's the second to last year. Then I want to talk a little bit more about the RAISE Act, which I talked about at the beginning of the presentation. So this slide is my attempt to sort of map out the structure of the programs that were initiated or are being initiated through this act. This initiative is key to the governor's strategy to growing the economy and making Maryland more competitive. And its importance to the governor is underscored by the fact that it was in the first batch of bills he signed into law, the first state that he was able to sign bills, and that was on April 8th. The goal of the RAISE Act is to break down barriers to adoption of registered apprenticeships, to allow more industries to adopt registered apprenticeships and expand them to new industries and employers, while at the same time maintaining standards of high quality. So Under the Department of Labor, or within the Department of Labor, there's four, and you see them there bolded on the slide, new programs or bodies or initiatives that the Act provides. The first there on the bottom right is the Maryland Office of Registered Apprenticeship Development, established within the Maryland Apprenticeship and Training Program, MATP. This is tasked to develop and scale registered apprenticeships across industries and occupations. And it's also charged with supporting apprenticeships and tracking them across the state. MORAD is advised by the Registered Apprenticeship Development Advisory Board. You see that above it, little dotted line there. And that board is to consult with MORAD about developing strategy, reviewing program outcomes. It's to provide advice on programs, and it will evaluate MORAD and report on the results of that evaluation annually, each December 1st, to the General Assembly. Members of that Apprenticeship and Development Advisory Board are appointed legislators, labor leaders, and employers. One member from the Senate of Maryland, appointed by the Senate President, another member from the House of Delegates appointed by the Speaker, two members designated by the President of the Maryland State and DC AFL-CIO, and two members representing employers engaged in registered apprenticeships to be appointed by the governor, and the governor will also appoint a member to serve as chair of that board. Now, just to the left of MORAD is the Registered Apprenticeship Qualified Intermediary Program, RACI, I think for short, was developed to support program expansion. So RACI is a tool to scale registered apprenticeships and to provide a bridge of sorts between employers, apprenticeships, and training providers. So through a qualified intermediary, and that's defined as an entity that demonstrates expertise in connecting sponsors, employers, or potential apprenticeship program participants, and convene stakeholders to develop registered apprenticeship programs. These intermediaries will also conduct other functions key to its mission as determined by the department. RACI reports directly to the director of MATP, who in consultation with the Secretary of Labor, the Governor's Workforce Development Board, the Registered Apprenticeship Development Advisory Board, and the Department of Commerce is responsible for developing the program. I think the vision from what is described is ultimately that the work of these intermediaries will create a self-sustaining infrastructure that will exist to scale apprenticeships by collecting data and strategies, as well as promoting transparency, quality, and innovation. Moving to the left side of this slide is the establishment of the Maryland Pay Per Apprentice Program, MPPA, and its accompanying special fund. And this is established to incentivize and financially support employers to try the model by providing small business grants to sponsors to offset startup costs. The bill requires the governor to include an appropriation to cover administrative costs for MORAD in the annual budget bill. And I just want to note that the bill will apply retroactively to programs initially approved on or before January 1st, 2023. And it will take effect October 1st of this year. The next slide provides the same information as I shared on the previous slide. I just wanted to make sure you had something in writing to refer to with regard to what all of those entities were established to do. But I do want to highlight two items here. The bill does repeal the Youth Apprenticeship Advisory Committee. The governor felt that committee was duplicative in terms of what the Development Advisory Board will do and MORAD will do. And then it also codifies a default one-to-one journey person to apprentice ratio, but it also provides flexibility for non-hazardous occupations, including cybersecurity, for example, IT, healthcare, and education. And then just a high-level overview of the session. There was a lot of discussion about the budget, a lot of discussion about the blueprint. Of course, the state budget is always a great concern. So we began the session with a shortfall of cash of $2.9 billion and a structural deficit of almost $5 billion, which grew during session to nearly $3.5 billion. There were proposals at the beginning of session to reduce funding for blueprint formulas, and then a projected long-term budget for shortfall in FY27 of $2.9 billion. And then going out to FY30 of $6 billion. But we ended the session with a structurally balanced FY26 budget with almost $2.5 billion in cash reserves and a structural surplus of $5 million. And that was achieved by $2 billion in reductions to the general fund budget and $1.2 billion in new revenue. We ended with full funding of all blueprint formulas and funding for the blueprint through the special Blueprint for Maryland's Future Fund until FY28, and a significantly improved long-term budget outlook. A projected shortfall in 27 reduced to $155 million, and a projected shortfall reduced by 50% from $6 billion to $3 billion in FY30. And I just wanted to note that the legislature did provide for any potential downturn in federal revenues with the provision that if a cumulative reduction in the December general fund estimate and the Blueprint for Maryland's Future Fund estimate in the December Board of Revenues estimate report is at least 3.75% below the March general fund estimate in the March Board of Revenues estimates report, the per pupil formula increases in education aid will be required to be zero, and any additional funding required increases will also be zero. There's also also federal downturn language for the state budget as well, should revenues fall below $1 billion in what is budgeted. I just didn't include that language there. So I think that's it for me. If there are any questions, I'm going to stop sharing so I can see you. And then I'm happy to answer any questions.
Joy, that was very detailed, very good.
Okay.
That was very comprehensive.
I concur. Thank you. That was a lot of information to condense in a few slides, and you did a great job. I think with more time, we'll see. I'm really interested in that apprenticeship language and the restructuring and the providing incentives for businesses. So I think I'll be very interested to see how this progresses throughout the year. Excited that career counseling has been fully funded for the next few years so that we can continue career counseling. So.
Yep. Well, there should be a report on that registered apprenticeship program, at least a preliminary one, by the end of the year. So you'll see some results soon.
I did have one question about the career counseling metrics. Are you able to go back to the slide as it related to career counseling metrics and the number of students employed after graduation?
I think I closed my slides, but I can tell you. So you were asking about, employed after graduation.
Correct. And
Yeah.
I was wondering, how does that translate to the multiple pathways students can take? That was my wondering when I saw that data point. And I was hoping you might be able to potentially provide some insight. I don't know if there was the sentiment of anyone else or.
I don't know, but just so we all are refreshed by what that, so there's two data points. Employment rate of program graduates within 6 to 12 months post-graduation, and then the percent of students employed in their field of interest or related industry within a year of graduation. And they're linked to some of the data points in the prior pieces, which were about getting experience or work in their field of interest, which they would have identified pre-graduation. So I think that's how they're aligned. That's how that's aligned to while they're in high school, and connecting to once I've graduated, drawing a line back to your interests in high school and what your experiences were as well.
Yeah, so I'm thinking multiple things. One is, of course, students may take multiple routes after graduation. Some of our students may be employed while they are exploring higher education, but how is that quantified? The other piece is one part that we talk about when students are being exposed to different careers while they're in high school is it's just as valuable to learn that this is the career for me as it is that this is the career that's not for me.
Right.
And so that I think sparked just that kind of line of questioning, because I think that is valuable information as well as it relates to, yes, I experienced this in high school, but this isn't something I want to do. I thought it was one thing, but then I worked in this field and I realized that that's not for me, but I'm still doing an equally great thing, whatever that thing may be.
Right, right. I think maybe that was their intent of creating a small timeline in terms of being employed in that field or industry or sector for 6 to 12 months versus, did you remain employed over 5 years, which is a different question. So that might have been their thinking around keeping it to. I think what there are from the questions they're asking, it sounds like they just want to make sure students had a valuable path forward that resulted in a path forward after graduation. So, but I fully agree with you, and I think it's especially difficult now for students. There's just a lot out there to choose from, and I'm not really sure how you're going to do that at 18 or 16. And it's good to try things that you're interested in and that you that interest you. So they are giving you a bit of time, and I think it'll be important to come up with quality long-term metrics in addition to ones that they've already prescribed through the law.
So
Adam?
my concern is the same as Olivia's. I'm concerned about students who decide to go to college and aren't working, what type of impact that's going to have on these metrics. I agree with Olivia that, part of career counseling is to not only decide what you want to do, but what you don't want to do, and having those opportunities to do that. So I'm just wondering if this is something that this committee wants to do a deeper dive into and maybe have some recommendation. I know this is in statute now, but at least how to interpret this and how to take some things into consideration when the AIB has to do this report in 2027.
If I can, I would just add to that I think the way it's phrased in the legislation is the AIB is tasked with identifying these long-term metrics, not actually putting them in place or measuring them, but sort of saying what would make sense to be looking at beyond, once kids do leave high school. So I think they said you should consider these types of things, but I don't think it's meant to be as like, this is a done deal and, you need to go ahead and measure these things. So I do think, getting your thoughts and your recommendations from this committee would be really helpful as the AIB has to identify these metrics as part of the report.
Thank you, Gretchen. And just to acknowledge that, Rachel Parker and CTE committee has said similar, that there's still some conversation to be had. And if we could speak into that, could be fruitful opportunity. So we'll make a note of that as a follow-up. And I just want to acknowledge how excellent that report was. Thank you, Joy. And the comments after, timely. We have 23 minutes remaining and a hard stop at 3:30 and a really hefty topic. So with gratitude for Dr. Richard Kincaid from MSDE for being with us to present on CTE and the new CCR updates.
Thank you all very much for the opportunity to come and share information about the College and Career Readiness standard that was recently passed by the board. Just want to make sure that everyone is able to see the presentation on my screen. Yes.
Yes.
All right. Perfect. So again, if you have questions, feel free to stop me along the way. It is a meaty presentation, no doubt. This committee will make this available, via email. You can also find this presentation on the state board website, and including, if you watch the video, some of the commentary from our state board members as they were also reviewing this presentation. So a couple of items that I just want to remind folks of. Statutory context around the CCR standard requires that the state board adopt a CCR standard that reflects the results of the empirical study that was done several years back by AIR. And then also in order to once the student has met the standard by the end of their 10th grade year and no later than graduation, meeting that standard enables a student to be prepared for post-CCR pathways, which are described within the blueprint as AP/IB, dual enrollment, early college, and CTE coursework. And so in order to access those, a student does need to meet the standard. It also allows students to enroll in credit-bearing courses in Maryland Community College as part of our dual enrollment programs. There was an interim standard that was set, which sunsets at the end of this school year. So, here in the next month or so. And ultimately what this standard did is look at English and math proficiency. So earning a certain cut score on the English 10 MCAP, and that varied based on when the student took it. It also dipped down into PARCC. And then on math, a certain cut score on Algebra 1, Algebra 2, or geometry, or being able to meet the level of 520, which was proficiency on the math SAT. Fast forward an additional year, there was a new standard that was adopted based on that AIR study in 2024 by the state board, which gave two different pathways for a student to be able to meet CCR. Option one was what we were calling academic success, so earning a high school grade point average of 3.0 or higher, and being able to show mastery in math of earning either a grade of A, B, or C in Algebra 1, or scoring proficient or above on the Algebra 1 MCAP. Option two allowed a student to score proficient or above on the ELA 10 and the Algebra 1 MCAP assessment. So students through that last standard were able to meet it based on those two criteria. So based on the difference between the interim and the new standard, that new standard adopted in 2024 provided access to an additional 27% of students that did not meet the interim standard, but were able to meet that new standard that was elevated in 2024. And we feel like those 27% of additional students were simply assessed differently while still maintaining that same level of rigor of what we wanted students to be able to identify and show, of what we would then deem sort of ready for college or ready for career. When you look at the PowerPoint, you can see the various demographic breakdowns based on student ethnicity and then by student experience. Based on that new standard, so you can see the subpopulations of students that impacted directly. The benefits of meeting the CCR standard, again, entitle students to be enrolled in credit-bearing courses at any Maryland community college or open enrollment public institution. Also provides access to those post-CCR pathways at no cost to the student or the student's parents. Additionally, students who have met the CCR standard are entitled to have the LEA cover the cost of 2 dual enrollment courses per fall and spring academic semester. That's based on guidance that was issued jointly from the AIB and also the state board in April of 2024. Benefits for students who have not yet met the CCR standard. It allows students to have initial access to post-CCR pathways. And so the way that we have defined initial access is leaning into that guidance from April of 2024 which includes either the first 2 courses of a CTE program of study, up to 2 AP or IB courses, or up to 2 dual enrollment or dual credit courses. So students are still able to enroll into these courses while they are working to meet the CCR standard. That will change per Blueprint once Blueprint has been fully implemented, but not before 2027. Once the Blueprint has been fully implemented, at some point after 2027, a student would have to be CCR in order to access the post-CCR pathways. A couple of CCR supports that are important to notate. Students in 11th and 12th grade who have not yet met the standard have a number of CCR supports that are available to them. First and foremost, a student will have the right to retake a course which they have not earned a C or higher. They also have the ability to reattempt an assessment that they have not yet scored proficient on. Starting in 23-24 school year as well, students in any grade up to and including 10th grade who are not on track to meet the CCR standard will be provided a myriad of supports that will help them to level up, to gain that proficiency level in math and ELA, so that they can meet that standard as soon as possible so that they can unlock the full benefit of post-CCR pathways. One notation that I will make, earlier this spring, our math team made recommendations which were unanimously approved by the state board, which reorganized math for the state. And so beginning with the graduating class of 2030 and 31, so that would be students who are freshmen, beginning in 27-28 school year, the math mastery option is going to change. And so you'll recall from that earlier guidance, the state board unanimously approved math pathways, which include a new course called Integrated Algebra 1 and Integrated Algebra 2. And so these are courses, you can learn more detail about that, I believe is the February state board meeting that this was presented. To learn about how integrated algebra includes Algebra 1, geometry, statistics, and a little bit of Algebra 2, and then gives advanced course options to students that align those advanced math courses now to career. And so based on your career pathways, you then have options like Computer Science A or AP Statistics or a number of other options that you can take. So this is what that language is going to change to on the math mastery component of the CCR standard, beginning with that graduating class of 2030-31. As we were redesigning and reconsidering the CCR standard, one of the things that we were leaning into, when that standard was passed in 2024, so many people across Maryland said this is a great standard that really only calls into action the college side of college and career readiness. It should just be a college readiness standard. We don't see career anywhere here. And so the state board asked MSD to begin exploring ways that we could integrate career components into the standard, which still assessed language and math proficiency, still had that same idea of a student being ready for college and career. And so the team here at MSDE, sprung into action. And so my partner in crime on this, Phil Lasser, and a number of other folks from teaching and learning across our agency, came up with 4 guiding priorities for this work. Prioritizing equitable opportunities for all students regardless of situation, ensuring that all options meet the CCR standard and are equally rigorous, avoid opportunities to circumvent the intent of the policy. So we don't want people to try to game the system, right? And then ensure alignment with other statewide improvement efforts, including the Accountability and Assessment Task Force, standards revision processes, so that there's alignment between school report card and other things that are happening as a result of Blueprint across the state. So ultimately, we came up with 9 additional criteria as the proposal. So starting in school year 25-26, so this will go into effect this coming August, there are 9 ways that a student can additionally show that they are CCR. First is earning a 1-year GPA of 3.0 or higher in their 11th grade or 12th grade year. The GPA is not cumulative of previous years, so a student that sort of messed around maybe the freshman year, it gives them an opportunity to circle back around and show the strength in later years of high school. It also includes courses completed in the student's 11th through 12th grade year. They must earn a grade of A, B, or C in a high school level math course at any point during their high school career. Option B is students earn a grade of C or better, unless otherwise specified in a dual enrollment agreement, in at least 2 core content dual enrollment or dual credit courses at any point in a student's high school career. One of these courses must be a math course, and one of the courses must be in either LEA, science, or social studies course. Option C, meet a performance threshold in at least 2 advanced academics, so this is AP or IB programs, of those assessments at any point during their high school career. One of the assessments must be a math assessment, and one of the assessments must be an ELA, science, or social studies assessments. And then for AP, we give the cut scores. So proficient on AP is a 3 or higher. For IB diploma program, the score is a 4 or higher. Option D, meet the college and career readiness benchmarks on the SAT, PSAT, or the SAT. So we define those cut scores. CCR in the SAT is a 480 on reading and writing section and earn a score of at least 530 on the math section. Or meet college and career readiness on the PSAT National Merit Qualifying Test or PSA 10. Students must earn a 480 on reading and math or reading and writing, and then a score of at least 530 on math. And then to meet CCR on the ACT, students must earn a score of at least 18 on the English section and earn a score of at least 22 on the math section. There are some business rules that will follow this particular component. And so very similar to how colleges will allow students to super score on each one of these. So the best math versus the best English score on multiple tests. Students would be able to do this as well. So if you take the test, you meet math, retake it, you meet English, we'll super score that, and that'll allow you to meet the standard. Option E, attain a score of at target on both math and English arts dynamic learning maps alternative assessment. So this is going to be the assessment for students with the most significant cognitive disabilities who are already participating in the alternate framework. So these are not diploma students, they're certificate students. Think about this as the 1% of 1% of students that still need a pathway to be able to show opportunity into work. Option F, earning a silver or better on the ACT Work Keys National Career Readiness Certificate Assessment. G, earn a state-approved industry-recognized credential that's aligned with a CTE and/or comprehensive arts pathway. H, complete the high school level of a registered apprenticeship program. And I, earning a score of at least 50 on the ASVAB. So these are the 9 criteria as presented to the state board. I will say that the state board approved these unanimously at the, at the March board meeting. This went through multiple rounds of public comment detailed here. This is the cover of the document that was circulated. Ultimately, we received 269 responses. In addition, we also presented this out multiple iterations to our chief academic officers for LEAs across the state. CT directors also had the ability to weigh in on this. Making sure that LEA superintendents had an opportunity to weigh in as well through our superintendent's transmittal process. Ultimately, all of those respondents included a broad swath of the Maryland community. Generalized feedback, folks were positive on earning a C or better in 2 content dual enrollment or dual credit courses. Earning an industry recognized credential topped out the list as having the most positive effect with the public feedback, and then completing the high school level of a registered apprenticeship came in second. Certainly feel like our CTE community had their thumb on the scale for those. Additionally, our public comment fell into a couple of buckets. So strong support for multiple pathways for students to be able to demonstrate multiple ways that they are ready. Most frequently mentioned item was expanding or modifying the GPA criteria. So looking at a 1-year versus like a cumulative GPA. Implementation challenges, including timelines and guidance for criteria on what needs to be included. And then equity concerns remain a priority across our state. particularly for our special education, our ML students, multilingual, access disparities across different districts, transportation, issues for some of these, come into play. For the information that we did have, we ran a simulation on the additional access the new standard would provide. So this is only one of those criteria. So this is being able to meet the CCR readiness benchmark on SAT or ACT. And ultimately, by that single component alone, students were able to show mastery. About nearly 3,000 additional students were able to show mastery of meeting CCR simply by meeting those proficiency thresholds on SAT or SAT. Our timeline for this is quick. So starting in 25-26 school year, students can start utilizing the additional criteria options in preparation for school year 26-27. So for example, if a student had a 1-year 11th grade GPA of 3.5 this coming school year, they'd be recognized as meeting CCR in the summer of 2026 and have access to those benefits starting that next school year. And then, of course, beginning with graduating class of 2030-31 is when that math mastery component would be revised for students. That's the requested board action. Ultimately, we asked them to, approve these new standards as presented. They did unanimously. And ultimately, this is what that proposed new standard would look like. I have no doubt that MSD will be presenting soon to our broader community some flashy artwork and additional flowcharts, which will help LEAs navigate this. The other element that I will also share is we are working on a business rule guidance document and frequently asked questions, which will no doubt be an iterative process, but this will help LEAs as they implement the CCR standard and also how they communicate it to the community so that all of our students are able to walk through this eyes wide open and know what standard is available to them, how they're going to be assessed so that they can begin planning for those post-CCR pathways when the time is right. So that was a quick presentation. Promised you, Dave, I'd get through it fast. Bam, there we go.
Impressive. We do have a few minutes. We have 5 minutes to have some comments and questions. And I see a couple in the chat. One is my own. It's when you talk about the 9 keys, sorry, this is my analogy and it may not be apt, but the 9 keys to the CCR door, all of equal rigor. Are those all keys that open up all pathways on the other side of that door? In other words, if someone earns, say, a trades IRC, would that person necessarily be headed into like a biomed track at the college level, or could there be some nuance there?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's always nuance, but I think also if you circle back to the foundational CCR standard as written and passed in 2024, like, I don't know that you could make the argument that being proficient in Algebra 1 and 10th grade English makes you, a success story in a college biomed pathway, right? I think what it does do is provide sort of the keys to the front door to say, I'm coming with a certain level of skills that I've been able to demonstrate at a minimum level to be successful in a post-secondary program. And I like your, many keys to the CCR door analogy. I like the quote from Einstein that says, if you assess a fish for its ability to climb a tree, then it's going to live its entire life thinking it's a failure. And I think what these new standards do is provide students multiple ways to show and demonstrate mastery of what we deem entry-level sort of requirements in a way that matches them, right?
Yeah, that's helpful. And there's a follow-up question. Another question is, in the move to increase access, how do we enable students' success? Success is the counterpart twin to access.
Yeah, and it's a great question. And I think the best way to answer that is it starts early, right? We can't wait until a student is in 10th grade to then have the light bulb go off and recognize that they are not on track to be CCR. This is why initiatives like career counseling all the way back in middle school become so critical. It's why, multi-tier support, our MTSS, tier 1, tier 2, programming becomes so critical, so that we are able to recognize early on when a student begins to sort of go off, the path, to be able to scaffold and differentiate and connect with that student to make sure that they are not all the way into the middle of high school when we finally realize that, they're off level, right? We took an initial stab at this. You can find on the College and Career Pathway pages on the MSD website a series of playbooks that can be used. So in PK all the way through 10, these are proactive strategies to help keep a student on track. In grades 11 and 12, these are responsive strategies, reactive strategies for 11th and 12th graders that aren't on track, and ways that educators can work across content areas to help them get back on track. That is one step of multiple interventions that need to happen. But I think the earlier we start, the better, and more resources are on the way.
Thank you, sir.
So, Richard, question for you. What's the best way for us to get this information to the career coaches and educate them on this?
Yeah, that is such a great question, Kirk. As you know, my team is in the process of hiring a career counseling coordinator, which is going to help coordinate the professional learning components for career coaches across the state. I think that's one avenue. I think it's sort of like anything, what is 9 touch points on new content in order to fully internalize it? I think we have to tell them early, we have to tell them often, and we have to be consistent in the messaging. That's true for our career counselors, but I also think it's true for the broader community, so that we know what it means when a student is going to, Chesapeake College, and Dr. Harper is trying to evaluate whether a student, like, he knows what CCR means, right? It has meaning to him. And same for our employers, right? So I think it's a broad message. I hear there's a great convening happening pretty soon with career coaches. Maybe, maybe there's some room for something like this.
So
I don't know a guy, but
you're going exactly where I was hoping you would go. Let's follow up to see, because I think because we have, and what Richard's talking about is on Monday the 28th, there's a convening at the Marathon Institute for all the career coaches. We really wanted this to be career coaches learning from each other and sharing best practices, but I think this is something that's timely and important. So Brandon and I will follow up with you, Richard.
perfect.
And just to piggyback on that outreach aspect of it, Richard, thank you for the presentation. I know a member of my staff was asking about some of the CTE data, but also CCR data. And so we are now producing the student outreach guide for next school year. And so we'd love to reconnect just to make sure that it is the most current, because this goes into the hands of middle and high schoolers.
That would be good. And if you would like, we could also try to expedite something with our communications team to maybe have a graphic that could be included.
That would be amazing. Yes.
Yeah.
Thank you.
I know we don't have time, but I just want to say how I'm so excited I could just explode at these multiple keys, because we all have experienced folks who have done very well, depending, and it doesn't matter what key you use. We are all ending up in careers. And so I think that that's just such an important aspect to include all of these different ways that we all can be successful, especially for our students. I love what you were talking about, the failure thought process with students and how it's important for them to have that belief. And this just shows that. So thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
And I wish my partner in crime, Phil Lasser, could be here. He is on vacation right now. But he certainly had a heavy hand in development of this. And so I would be remiss if I did not mention his name. he's done some extraordinary work for the last couple of years on the CCR standard and navigating internal, processes. So, when you see Phil, at the corner 7-Eleven, pat him on the back.
Well, I know there's lots more good to discuss here. It's two incredible, substantive conversations and presentations today. So thank you, Dr. Kincaid. Thank you, AIB and Joy. More to come.
Hey, if there's nothing else, I think we can conclude. What do you think, team?
I think this has been one of our most substantive meetings yet. So a lot of good topics. Thank you to our guests for presenting and for the people out there listening.
Thanks, everyone. Have a great day.
Bye, everyone.
Bye, thank you.